One of the things that's super important is creating a comp set. Some of you may not understand what that means, but basically what we want to do is we want to take our property and we want to compare it to properties that are as similar to ours as possible. So my property in Gulf Shores is not on the beach. I can't compare myself to properties that are on the beach. Otherwise, my numbers will be skewed way higher. I'm going to think I'm going to do way more money than I actually am going to do. A beachfront property will always do way more money than a non-beachfront property. So what I want to do is compare myself to non-beachfront properties that have a pool and a hot tub in the community that people can use, that maybe have similar design elements to mine. I'm being very specific here. Sometimes you have to be more broad with what your comp set looks like because you're not going to get enough data to have good statistical relevance. My goal is always to have 25 to 30 properties in my comp set. I think that gives you enough where if one property goes from $100 a night to $1,000 a night, it doesn't totally skew your numbers one way or the other. So if we were doing a comp set for my particular property, first thing I want to do is I want to highlight the things that drive revenue. Okay. So in a lot of markets, that's going to be pets. It's going to be beachfront. It's going to be hot tub, pool. I always want to look at estimated occupancy and revenue just because I want to see that. But in some markets, you might find that max guests drives more revenue than a bedroom count. For the most part in this area, most of the 5 bedrooms sleep about the same number of people. It's not necessary for me to pare this down to max guests. But realize there are certain markets where you might have a 3-bedroom property that sleeps 14 people. If that's the case, you probably want to compare yourself to the 4 and 5 bedroom properties in the area because those are more likely to be your true comps as far as how many people you can sleep at your property. So once I select all of those columns that I want to look at, then I can start to look through these statistics here. So what you'll notice first is we have studios. So my property is a 5-bedroom property. So I'm going to start by I'm going to type 5 in there and I'm going to click enter. Okay. So now all I'm seeing is 5-bedroom properties in this list. We only have 12 pages now in this list. Before we had over 100. So the next step is star review. These ones say NA. That means they have no reviews. That doesn't help me because they're not established hosts. So I want to filter that out. So I can use Cool Alligator and say, I only want more than say 4.7 stars. So that filtered out those NAs. I want to compare myself to other properties that are doing a great job hosting. The next step, again, we can look at number of reviews. We have a couple here that only have 5 reviews. So depending on where I am, I might say, I really want more than 10 reviews. So same thing, I could filter that out. In this case, we start to get too few listings very quickly. So I'm going to keep those in there because I need them for my statistical relevance. Then we can move to price, occupancy, estimated revenue. This one is another one that's good to use. So this one says 179 nights. This one says 177 nights. That means that they're not rented full time. Maybe someone lives in these houses half of the time. Ideally, we want to filter those out as well. So I might say, I only want properties with more than 200 active nights. Okay. If you had a midterm property, this is a great place to filter out your short-term rental properties. So you could use a minimum stay of more than 28 days, for example, to find those other midterm rentals that are in your market. So then from here, I want to look at this and I want to say, okay, I'm not beachfront. So I need to filter out the beachfronts. So beachfronts are 1 and non-beachfronts are 0. PriceOps did something really dumb with this. If you haven't been in here recently, you can't just hit 0 and enter. Everything goes away. You have to actually say equals 0 and then it works. Why they did that? Just to make it more complicated for us. I don't know. I talked to them. I told them they should change it back. But basically we can start to pare down and we can come up with a very accurate comp set. Now, once I have this comp set, I always want to make sure that all of these numbers make sense. Okay. So I'm going to call out a couple numbers here. This one here, estimated occupancy percentage, 20%. That seems really low to me. That makes me wonder, was this available all the time? The other one that I can see on that same line is it only has 5 reviews. So it's only been listed for a short period of time. So this may not be a great comp for me to use. Some people may want to use it, some people may not, and that's your choice. But what I always like to do is I like to click on every single one of these properties and just make sure it is a real comp. They do have availability and all of that. If we just assume that everything is good, then we can have skewed numbers like 20% occupancy. So when you're looking at your statistics, this 20% occupancy is going to bring down the rest of these statistics that are more in the norm. The rest of these we look at and we can say, it's probably like 50 to 60% is pretty normal in that market. 20% is a pretty big change from that. So you want to be careful adding those in. Cool. So that's creating a comp set. Once you have your comp set, you click on the ones that you want to add to your comp set. You name your comp set. So this one I would name something like 5-bedroom, non-golf front. You always want to name it something very specific so that you make sure that you don't forget, because you might create 2 or 3 different comp sets, or as time goes on, you might want to have different comp sets. So I try and be very specific. Then you click generate comp set, and then it will show up here. These are all the comp sets that I created in this area. The cool thing, once you create a comp set, it shows up here. And now I can sort this entire report by that specific comp set. And that's a real key, because if you want to compare yourself directly to your comp set, you need to know what is your comp set charging? What's their ADR? What's their occupancy? All of those things. I can now do that very easily because I have that comp set built in here. Because the comp sets here are pretty small, I'm going to keep this as a 5-bedroom just to give you better info. But if we scroll down, there's really great info in this report. And this is a real highlight. Spend some time looking at this report. You will get amazing data out of this. I know that because of the Zoom, this is really hard to see, but you can see the scope of the graph, right? We can see that June and July are our high season. Pretty obvious. June and July are our high season. And we can see that it's repeated by revenue, RevPAR, occupancy, ADR. Those are the highest months all the time. Then we look and we see, okay, we have a shoulder season before, we have a shoulder season after, and then we have low season. And you can see that there's a huge difference here between ADR and high season, 992, and ADR and low season,